And this is it, the last in a nutshell video. Today I'm presenting you the Berserker, so let's get into it. The Berserker is a warrior type class that uses a massive sword weapon to deal damage to his foes. Most of his blows come from swinging, exploding, and just in general doing massive damage to his opponents with his sword. I know we just talked about the sword, but the sword is very important and it's big. So while you are attacking opponents left and right, you are filling up your anger gauge. Yes, you do become angrier the longer the fight goes on. Once you fill up this gauge, you are then ready to activate it and go into your Berserk mode, which gives you 20% attack speed and movement speed and increases your critical strike chance by 30%. So basically it's a form of super mode or Saiyan mode for the Berserker. Once it runs out, it is put on a 30-second cooldown until you can accumulate gauge again. But this would be the standard playstyle without any class engravings. But of course, as with any other class, you want to choose a playstyle with your class engraving. And this is where it gets juicy. First up, the older and now less commonly played playstyle, the Killer Move playstyle. When using the Killer Move engraving, your Berserk mode gets a nice buff and you will deal an additional 50% critical damage. On top of that, it removes the 30-second cooldown window when you deplete the gauge, so that you can immediately start collecting anger gauge again. But let's be real here, you're not here to talk about Killer Move, are you? You want to talk Madness. The latest FOTM most popular change and engraving now, of course, is the Madness, or AUNA name Mayhem. So what does Madness do? Basically, your anger bar is always full, aka you're always angry now. While so, you are applied the Madness buff, which does the following. It increases your damage by 18%, movement speed and attack speed by 15%, and reduces your damage taken by 65%. That sounds crazy, too good to be true, which it is of course. Because not only do you take reduced damage, but your maximum HP is reduced by 75%. Yes, 75. So basically you become perma-enraged for a massive damage boost, but you also become much squishier. Yes, you do take reduced damage, but the Madness engraving definitely makes it also that you're more prone to dying. There's also another thing about Madness regarding engravings that we will be talking about later, so make sure to stay tuned. But for now, enough about class engravings. Let's have a look at some of the skills I suggest running. Please note these skills that I'm going to present are what I personally ran, which is based on experience from other players that I asked and I researched from Korean players and are for the Madness playstyle. There might be other optional skills to run and skills that are viable. Also again, please note these are the Russian translated names, so they will be different in the AUNA version, but as long as the picture matches, you will be fine. First up is a standard mobility skill, Shoulder Charge, a simple mobility tool that allows you to move quite far and to dodge incoming attacks or reposition yourself. Next up, we have Strike Wave, a double charge skill that does damage in front of the Berserker for multiple hits. Tempest Slash is a combo move that makes Berserker fly into the air while swinging his sword around, causing damage. Execution is also another combo move where the Berserker first deals damage by swinging his sword and then hits the ground, doing massive damage. One of our utility skills, for ourselves mostly, is Red Dust. When using Red Dust, the Berserker throws a form of red line or red dust at the target and makes it vulnerable, taking increased damage by you for a short period of time. On top of that, you also increase your uncritical strike chance by 20% for 6 seconds. Another form of utility is brought with Chainsword. Reason being is that it is a skill that allows you to counter your opponent. It is vital to always bring a counter skill into raids to be able to counter the enemies. It also increases your attack speed. Salt Storm is a skill where the Berserker makes a small jump and then hits the ground and unleashes a small frontal cone of damage while also putting a burn effect on the target. Lastly, one of our most powerful skills is the Hellblade. The Berserker jumps forward and slams his sword into the ground, holding it there and then on release dealing massive damage around him. Lastly, before we move on, his two ultimates are quite easy: Chain of Vengeance for AoE mobbing or if you are afraid of missing the other awakening, and Charge to deal more damage to a single target but has a charge time. Something worth noting is that you also have an identity skill which simply makes the Berserker swing his sword in a frontal cone. Now that you have seen all the skills, it is time to talk about how it feels to play the Berserker. My information on this is purely based on the Madness engraving, as I have not tried out the Killer Move. For Madness, this playstyle is actually pretty cool. I do believe that the Berserker actually turns into a pretty fast-paced class with this engraving. You also have no more real downtime at all, which means you will be able to do decent damage, which is something that is very crucial. Yet, even though you are not relying on gauge anymore, you now are waiting for your cooldowns. I have to admit, I do feel like his cooldowns are pretty long, so you still have a form of burst window gameplay. You basically apply red dust and then start smashing your opponents with various sword attacks, which obviously then are enhanced. That is the idea behind the Berserker playstyle. This means you should also, if possible, be aware of potential windows of your opponents where it is guaranteed to hit your skills during your small burst window. Otherwise, I would suggest to also just use all of your skills on cooldown as much as possible, if the rate you're doing allows for that. My personal opinion of the Berserker is that this is a class that feels quite fun and powerful. The way it is played makes me believe that every single sword hit is unique and feels strong. The Hellblade specifically is a skill that is really fun to use. Now on top of that, we're not even done. I feel like this class is honestly pretty strong. Yes, you do give up some survivability with Madness, but you are rewarded with an insane amount of damage amplification. So if you feel like you're able to survive in raids and dodge properly, this is definitely something you should look into playing. One last thing I want to mention that is seriously really cool is the madness effect around the character. It looks absolutely stunning. I love how my Berserker looks like whenever I have the madness active. On top of that, another thing is what I love, the way the Berserker holds his sword while running around. I don't know, there's just something to it that I really like. And now on to the part where we shortly look at how to build our Berserker. First up, for stats. When running the Madness Engraving, you simply want to focus on crit. Yeah, get as much of that as you can to crit as much as possible. Secondary, you want to go for agility, so that you have more attack speed, movement speed, and some of that sweet cooldown reduction to get your abilities up faster again. Engravings as usual are a big part of our build, so let's have a look at some you could run. As usual, we run our Madness Engraving and then follow this up with a pinch of Grudge, because Grudge is just broken. As we go for high crit, you can also run Sharp Blunt, which is going to be very strong. And then we have an engraving that I would usually never ever suggest, but works perfectly on the Berserker with the Madness Engraving. The Master's Potential. Why is it so good? Well, it increases your damage output by 16% while you are below 50% of your health. And guess what? You are at 25% of your max health at all times, so this effect is applied and you basically get a free 16% damage increase. Another few very good engravings for the Berserker would be Curse Doll, Blitz Commander, and Adrenaline, which is quite hard to keep up, but a last resort engraving you can run. And with that, we're done with the last and final in a nutshell video. I have covered now all classes that are going to be available on the LostArk EU/NA release. I do hope you enjoyed the Berserker in a nutshell video, and maybe I convince you to give it a go now or even play it as your main, who knows? Keep in mind to try as many classes as possible because most of them are very fun. Anyway, please make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this video and subscribe for more LostArk content. You can also leave me a follow on Twitch where I stream regularly, and lastly a follow on Twitter to never miss any updates. Wishing you a great rest of your day wherever you live.